Harry waited for the Death Eater to finish making his order before apparating to the nearby strip mall. He knew from experience that this was where he would find the nearest pizza TP. Donning his invisibility cloak, he snuck inside behind a returning delivery boy. He looked eerily similar to Stan Shunpike. Harry waited for the order to be finished, and 15 minutes later that same delivery boy was handed a large, square leather bag bound for number 12. As soon as they were out of the door, Harry nailed him with the Imperious. With that done, he apparated back to the alley between numbers 11 and 12 where the shades of Sirius and Regulus still waited. Oops! Yeah, failing to dismiss the dead apparently left them stuck on this plane. It was best to be careful of that in the future. Alright, I think we have a plan, Sirius began. And in the time it took for Shunpike Jr. to arrive, they'd finished sharing the strategy with him. It was much riskier and much more violent than Harry's plan. He just wanted to sprinkle a slow-acting poison on the pizza and then sneak in under the cloak. He could then just slaughter the survivors in their sleep. But he was feeling antsy and in need of proper exercise after so many days resting, so a more kick-the-door-down kind of strategy suited him just fine. Little Stan arrived in record time. Harry sent a command through the Imperious Curse to park quietly a few doors down and sneak over to him. This he did. While he did this, Harry dug through the mokeskin pouch for the items they needed. He realized this was something he should have finished prepping during their wait and vowed to be more proactive during such downtimes in the future. As Harry did this, the Shade of Regulus walked behind the delivery boy and entered him as if putting on a skin suit. The glazed-over look of an Imperious victim was soon replaced by the mischievous look of a black. Harry realized exactly what the Shade had just done. "We can do that?" Sirius exclaimed, echoing Harry's thoughts. That changed everything. You can possess the next, pizza boy," Regulus mocked Sirius with a wink. Regulus then helped himself to the assortment of Weasley fireworks Harry had dumped onto the ground. He emptied the leather box of its contents and replaced them with said fireworks to the point that it was bursting at the seams. Harry also gave Regulus the sword, which he tucked into the back of his belt in such a way as to conceal it from anybody he was facing. They were all ready to go. "Well, here goes nothing," Regulus sighed as he walked up the steps and knocked on the door to his childhood home. Soon enough, the hungry moron whose earlier phone call led to this opportunity stumbled to the door and answered it. The Snatcher didn't even finish opening the door before Regulus hurled the leather bag over his head. With it deposited in the hallway beyond, Regulus charged through after it. The Snatcher's grunt at being bodily flung by a scrawny 16-year-old was immediately drowned out by the chaos of light and sound erupting from the black pizza carrier. A moment later, Harry initiated the second phase of the plan with a similar speed and efficiency to that of his goduncle. "Creature!" Harry bellowed over the fireworks, smashing against the window just above his head. The house elf materialized and was immediately stunned. He was too much of a liability with his split loyalties, willing seditionist or no. He would need to remain sedated until Walburga's portrait was taken care of. "Dobby!" Harry yelled again, still without fear of being heard over the chaos. As if to mirror Harry's thoughts, a sparkling gold dragon just crashed through that same window and ascended skyward towards the roof with a mighty roar. The second house elf appeared and ducked away from the shattering glass and crackling flames. Harry wasted no time in dispensing orders. "Take creature somewhere safe and keep him sedated until I call you back here," he yelled over the noise. Dobby nodded eagerly and disappeared with his older counterpart. On to part 3. Harry donned the cloak and sent the snitch skyward to give himself a top-down view of the entire premises. Closing his eyes, he executed a technique they had long practiced and prayed would finally pay off. He closed his eyes and focused on all other senses except for sight, and allowed the viewpoint of the Horcrux to take over. He could see himself from above as if in an out-of-body experience, while still possessed of his own sense of smell, taste, touch, and hearing. He stepped over the convulsing body of his companion's first victim. He was seizing in a violent death from the basilisk venom, so could be ignored. Into the hailstorm of fireworks he went. The hallway was already aflame, and he would have been blind were it not for his Horcrux and Moody's eye. He cast the flame-freezing charm on himself and charged through to the kitchen where Regulus was actively blocking killing curses with Gryffindor's sword. With one wave of Draco's wand, the ceiling caved in, bringing with it 6 low-level Death Eaters and Snatchers from the study above. A few of them did not survive the crash. Those who did had water poured on them from the broken pipes above. He knew the remaining forces were descending the stairs to flank the intruders at this very moment, so he needed to finish cleaning up here quickly. Fortunately, the 2 surviving Snatchers from the cave-in were rather stunned from seeing one of their companions reduced to a clothed puddle of marinara sauce. The 3 surviving Death Eaters still hadn't picked themselves up from their fall regardless. "Accio!" Harry bellowed, willing a sharp pipe, broken from the ceiling collapse, to fly towards him. Sadly, a thoroughly injured Death Eater stood up then, and directly in the path of the copper tube, as Regulus cleaved the Death Eater closest to him shoulder to crotch with the poisonous blade. The pipe never reached Harry. How was he supposed to get any of the plumbing repaired if Voldemort's followers kept getting in the way? He really needed to start a workplace safety seminar or something. By now, the pile of debris was soaked through from the spouts of water coming from above, and Harry saw an opportunity in that. The third Death Eater had drawn his wand, and the two surviving Snatchers had trained theirs on Regulus, who still hadn't raised his sword back up from his earlier downswing. The noise of fireworks around them and flashes of light were still masking all hints of Harry's unseen presence, and he fully intended to use that to his advantage. "Further obsidian!" Harry bellowed. The bolt of black lightning surged past Regulus, who was now backing away from the soaking pile of wood, metal, and flesh that was Harry's target. Not only did it react with the water as intended, but it dispatched all three of his enemies in a gruesome display of sparks and spasming muscles. He turned his gaze away from the gruesome scene as their smoking bodies fell to the wet ground. He focused his attention on Regulus. "Ready?" Harry asked. Regulus nodded and, with an upward flick of hawthorn and unicorn hair, he was sent flying upward into the study from Harry's Ascendio charm. He didn't quite make it high enough to land on his feet, so he flung the sword onto what little of the floor remained and grabbed hold of the ledge. Harry watched as he hoisted himself up with a grunt. He pushed through the pain of splinters tearing into his arms and legs with his every movement and got up onto his feet. Phase 3, Fast and Hard Assault, was complete. Now for Phase 4, Stall while Regulus destroyed the portrait. Harry turned his wand on the pile of debris and limb. With a wide sweeping motion, he covered the kitchen door with it. A few twists and turns of his wrist saw the jagged mass melt into a solid, vining barrier. It was ugly and wouldn't hold off his approaching attackers for long, but it would give them the sense of having the upper hand. After all, when somebody barricades themselves, it means they're on the defensive, right? Wrong. Harry raised his wand into the air and started a series of small S-curve motions. It was a specialized version of the summoning charm Fred and George had programmed into their fireworks, a trade secret known only to the two owners and their sole investor. Every single firework in and around the building came to him through the collapsed ceiling and broken window. They coalesced into a sphere above his head. It pulsed with life like a red and gold disco ball of fire and lightning with a steady heartbeat. It was ready to be unleashed onto the first few fools to burst in through the barricade. He could see from the snitch's vantage point that said fools would breach in 3, 2, 1. With a roar, the dragon firework led the charge, with the boar, hummingbird, and reindeer following close behind. They ran into the oncoming Death Eaters and blew right through them. The stampede of smoke and gore continued up the stairs, lighting all in its path of flame. It stopped only when Harry redirected it back downwards into the Death Eaters, who were smart enough to cast protections on themselves. They had hung behind in the hallway, but had still been surprised by the fiery onslaught. Harry charged out after it and, for the second time in his life, cast the Killing Curse. The first Death Eater fell to his curse when he failed to recognize it as such. In his defense, many of the harassing fireworks shared a similar hue of green. Harry beheaded the second one with a simple cutting charm. The third caught on that someone invisible was attacking and bolted over the railing to the first floor landing just before Harry's explosive hex could paint said railing with her brain matter. She avoided the follow-up by charging through an adjacent door. Thus, his spells left a hole in the ceiling and wall instead. It didn't help that his aim wasn't the best with his eyes closed and relying on a bird's-eye, X-ray view of the entire building. Practiced though he may be, it was still disorienting. It was worth the downside, as he watched her cast flame-proofing charms on herself before hiding behind a set of burning curtains for an ambush. He followed her into the downstairs drawing room and unleashed a third bombarda at the burning curtains. The force of his spell sent her mangled body crashing through the window and onto the small patch of grass that passed for her front yard. She was fortunately still within the ward, so the Muggle neighbors wouldn't see her, despite now flooding the streets in search of the noise. There were still a dozen more Death Eaters and Snatchers in the topmost floor, who were now trying to fill their bags with as many of the Black family tomes as possible in anticipation of escape, but they were too late. Regulus was upon Walburga's portrait, and Harry barely made it to the first flight of stairs in time to witness him plunge Godric's sword into her breast with his own eyes. He broke his connection to the snitch and opened them just as Regulus buried the blade all the way to its hilt. Her agonized scream was so loud that for a second Harry could no longer hear the fireworks around him. The death scream of the Horcrux dying sent a ripple through the air that killed all light and sound thereafter. It even deactivated the fireworks and lamps and all other charms in the building, though they all reactivated after a mere moment. Harry had broken contact with his own Horcrux in order to witness her demise with his own eyes, so he couldn't check to see if the Death Eaters had escaped yet, but he acted as if they hadn't. He withdrew the same silver knife he had used for a very different ritual just weeks before and slashed open his comparatively good hand with it. "I am Harry James Potter, godson of Sirius Orion Black and patriarchal heir to the most ancient and noble house of Black," Harry bellowed into the silence as the floor drank in his blood where it landed. "I declare all guests outside of the library to be under my protection, and all guests in the library to be intruders. So mote it be." The entire house creaked and moaned as the very space within it warped in recognition of the change of authority, and it searched its premises for any persons matching the newly defined terms of intruder and guest. The screams echoing from the upstairs library told Harry that no, the Death Eaters had not escaped, and they never would. Still, he double-checked. Closing his eyes, he felt for his other half above Grimmauld Place. When the connection was made, he looked over all of the rooms through his snitch and smiled. None of the intruders had left the library in time. and none of the prisoners were affected. Grimold Place had a special way of dealing with intruders. The wards worked by trapping them in place and slowly squeezing the life out of them as the space around them warped. It was a slow process that took hours, long enough for a head of house to personally check in on them and decide if they want to deal the killing blow themselves or leave them to die. "The battle is done," the Shade of Sirius said as it approached from behind Harry. "No, not yet." "Dobby!" Harry called. The elf appeared a few seconds later with a newly conscious creature. He was clearly just woken up, as per Harry's earlier instruction. "Dobby, creature, you are both to do your best to heal the children and women in the bedrooms before releasing them, or at least provide them with any first aid materials to do so themselves. If we do not have any, go purchase some in secret using any money belonging to our prisoners," he told them. "They are not to see you, and I want you to keep them away from the surviving Death Eaters and Snatchers." They both nodded but waited for further instruction. They were able to sense when he had more to say. "Ensure that, once they are made unconscious by the wards, that you dose each and every one of the intruders in the library with what remains of my draught of living death," Harry instructed. Dobby and Creature nodded before disappearing. Harry reconsidered the specificity of his instructions. "Creature!" he called again. The elf reappeared. "You are not to allow our unwilling guests to harm themselves or one another, nor leave the premises until I return. Am I understood?" he clarified. The elf had the nerve to grumpily kick at the ground before nodding and disappearing again. "Ah, good old Creature," Regulus chuckled as he descended the stairs to join him and Sirius, nearly slipping on the puddles of gore and pulverized flesh on the way down. Harry looked him over to find he was covered in the black sludge he associated with the destroyed Horcrux, along with no small amount of burns and ash. "Switch," Harry ordered. The dark specter of Regulus fled from the teenager's body and, before the poor muggle could catch his bearings, Sirius entered him. "Sirius, you stay here and watch over things. You have the best people skills out of all of us. Regulus, you're riding bitch on the bullet," Harry ordered. "I'll make sure they're all showered, fed, and well rested," Sirius nodded as Regulus sputtered indignantly. Harry ignored the younger brother's objection and walked through his incorporeal form to the front door, stepping over the now stilled Snatcher at the doorway. "I need a crash course in motorcycle riding, and seeing as it's your bike, you will be my teacher. Now come on, we have to get to Sheffield yesterday," Harry ordered.